All right, bread enthusiasts. If, like me, a warm, fresh, out-of-the-oven sandwich is like the ultimate comfort food, well, you're in for a treat.
Time to break out those aprons, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
We're ditching the store-bought stuff today because we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into making seriously good sandwich bread at home.
Love it.
And the best part is we've got an amazing guide from Revive Recipes to help us along the way. Like, forget culinary school. This is all about nailing that perfect fluffy texture. You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
yeah, that makes you want to just skip the fillings and go straight for the bread.
Exactly. But how do we get that bakery-style goodness at home? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Ready to transform those kitchens into, like, bread-making wonderlands.
Always up for a challenge. Where do we start?
Right back to basics with the ingredients. We're talking flour, yeast, water, salt. So that's pretty straightforward, right?
Deceptively simple. Right. I mean, yeah, those are the core players. And here's the thing. It's not just about tossing them together, you know?
Yeah.
It's about understanding what each ingredient brings to the party.
Ooh, okay. I like where this is going. Like a symphony of flavors and textures.
Exactly. So let's break it down. Let's talk about flour first. Because, I mean, there are so many different kinds. Does it really make a difference which one you use?
Right. I've always wondered that myself.
Oh, it totally does, especially when we're after that perfect texture. I
Mhm.
mean, think about it. Do you want, like, that cloud-like, super soft slice or something a little more, rustic and chewy?
Okay, yeah. So how do we get each of those?
Flour power. It all comes down to something called protein content. Think of protein as like those tiny little building blocks that give the bread its structure. All-purpose flour, that's your go-to for a softer crumb, your classic fluffy sandwich. But if you want something with a bit more bite, bread flour has got your back.
So it's all about choosing your own bread adventure.
I love it. Okay, but speaking of adventures, can we talk about yeast for a sec?
Go for it.
Because, full disclosure, sometimes I feel like yeast and I have a bit of a love-hate relationship. Sometimes it works, sometimes not so much.
Oh, I hear you. Yeast can definitely feel a little mysterious, but honestly, once you get the hang of it, it's like magic.
Okay, so what's the secret?
The key, no matter what kind of yeast you're using, active, dry, instant, fresh, whatever, is
Active.
activating it properly. Like, think of it this way. You wouldn't just, like, splash a sleeping friend with cold water to wake them up, right?
Definitely not.
Right? Same goes for yeast. You got to treat it gently.
Right.
Warm water, little touch of sugar, that's like a little wake-up call. Our source material called it waking up the yeast from a nap, which I kind of love.
So cute, and no bread bricks. Okay, so flour, yeast, check, check. But what about the water? I mean, it's just water, right? How much of a difference can it really make?
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Water is like the unsung hero of bread making.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about hydration, which directly affects how your dough comes together.
Mm.
Too little water, you're in for a tough time. Too much, and it's going to be sticky, hard to work with. Trust me, been there. It's all about finding that sweet spot, where the dough feels like soft and supple, just a little tacky, but not so much that it's like glued to your fingers.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so flour, yeast, water, we're on a roll. Now we got to talk about the ingredient that often gets overlooked but is so crucial, salt.
Right, like it seems kind of basic, but it makes such a difference.
Huge. Like I always thought it was just about the flavor.
Oh, it's way more than that. Remember how we were talking about yeast before?
Yeah.
Salt is like the boss of yeast, keeps it in check.
Really? What do you mean?
Think of it this way. Salt acts like a speed bump for the yeast. Keeps it from going too crazy and eating up all the sugar in the dough super fast.
Ah, okay, so without salt, you get like a wild yeast party.
Exactly. And nobody wants a bread hangover. You get those big holes, uneven crumb, and the flavor can even get a little dot off.
Wow, I never knew salt was so powerful. So it's like the key to a happy yeast balance.
Exactly. All right. So ingredients prepped. We're ready for the fun part,
So,
Ray Day.
yeah, time for some kneading.
All right.
Although I will admit, I'm definitely more of a stir with a spoon kind of baker. The whole getting my hands dirty thing is a little intimidating.
I get it. But honestly, kneading is where the magic really happens. You're helping the gluten develop, those strands that give bread that amazing chewy texture.
Right, right. Speaking of which, our source mentioned this whole window pane test thing. What is that exactly?
So it sounds kind of fancy, but it's really just a way to see if your dough has been kneaded enough. Basically, you pinch off a little bit of dough and try to stretch it really thin between your fingers.
Okay.
If it tears easily, gotta knead some more. But if you can stretch it thin enough to almost see light through it, you've nailed it.
Whoa! Like the dough is telling you it's ready. That's so cool. But what about those of us who, maybe prefer to keep our hands a little cleaner? Can I use a stand mixer for this?
Totally. Stand mixers are a lifesaver, especially for kneading. Takes all the work out of it. Just be sure to still check for that window pane effect, just to be sure.
Gotcha. It's like the bread whisperer's secret handshake.
Mhm.
All right, so we've passed the window pane test. What's next?
Okay, so now it's time to let the dough do its thing. First rise.
Ah, the waiting game.
This is where patience comes in handy. You're going to put your dough in a nice, lightly oiled bowl, cover it up, and let it hang out in a warm, draft-free spot.
For how long? What are you thinking, like an hour?
It really depends. Could be an hour, could be two. Depends on how warm your kitchen is, how active your yeast is feeling. The key is to let the dough double in size.
Double in size. It's like it comes alive.
Right, all those little yeast buddies doing their thing. Once it's nice and puffy, then you give it a gentle punch down.
Punch it down.
Yeah, don't be afraid to get in there. It's just to, redistribute the yeast a bit, get rid of any big air bubbles so you have a nice, even crumb.
Okay, got it. Punch down the dough. Check. What's next in our bread-making adventure?
Shaping. Now's our chance to get creative.
Ooh, I love this part. It's like playing with Play-Doh all over again.
Right. So our source material recommends a really simple technique for a classic loaf shape. You gently shape the dough into a rectangle,
Okay, rectangle, got it.
and then you're basically going to roll it up tightly from one of the short ends, like you're rolling a scroll.
Like a little bread burrito. I can do that.
Exactly. Pinch the seam, tuck in the edges, and then carefully place it seam side down in your greased loaf pan.
Sounds easy enough. Although I have a feeling this is one of those things that takes a little practice to, get that picture-perfect loaf shape.
Totally. Baking is all about practice. Don't worry if your first few loaves are a little, shall we say, rustic looking. What matters most is the flavor, and nothing beats homemade.
So true. It's about the journey, not just the destination. All right, so the dough is all snuggled up in its pan, ready for round two.
Second rise, aka proofing. This is where that airy, light texture really develops.
It's like a spa day for the dough before it goes into the oven.
Exactly. Warm and cozy, just what it needs to rise to the occasion, and you'll know it's ready for the oven when it's almost doubled in size again, all light and airy.
Gotcha. Proofing, check. And then it's finally baking time. Any tips for getting that gorgeous golden brown crust?
All right, so a hot oven is key here. We're talking like 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The exact baking time, that's going to vary a bit depending on your oven and how big your loaf is.
So how do you know when it's done? What should I be looking for?
Okay, so first, that beautiful golden brown color, that's always a good sign. But here's a little trick. Tap the bottom of the loaf. If it sounds hollow, you're good to go.
I love that, like a little bread drum solo.
Right. So satisfying.
Okay, so the loaf is out of the oven, smelling amazing, I'm assuming. What now? Do we slice into it right away or? Okay, as tempting as it is, gotta resist the urge for just a little bit longer. Letting the bread cool completely on a wire rack is crucial.
Really? Why is that?
It lets the internal structure set so you don't end up with a gummy mess when you slice it. It's all about delayed gratification for that ultimate bread eating experience.
Okay, I can be patient. It's cooling, I'm waiting, and then.
And then, my friend, it's time to slice that beauty open, slather on your favorite spreads, pile on whatever you like, and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Seriously, my mouth is watering just thinking about it. This deep dive has been incredible. We've covered so much ground, from the ins and outs of each ingredient to those pro baker techniques. Kneading, shaping, proofing. Who knew there was so much to learn about making bread?
Right, it's a whole world, but honestly, anyone can make amazing bread at home with a little guidance.
That's been the best takeaway for me, for sure. It doesn't have to be intimidating.
Exactly. Just got to get in there and experiment. And most importantly, have fun with it.
I love that. It's about the journey, not just the destination. All right, everyone, that's it for today's deep dive. Time for me to go put these newfound bread-making skills to the test. Until next time, happy baking.